Okay, so what's been happening in the US, one of the big things is that there was a huge, huge leak of sensitive intelligence information from the Department of Defense. Okay, and it's been going on for some time, some months. Things have been leaked, and it just became a big thing. Yeah, and and some of it, the leaks are, intelligence about the war. It also talks about how the U.S. was spying also on allies, not just on enemies, and a lot about Ukraine, and and some of it is really apropos to what's happening now, especially with Ukraine and arms shipments and everything like that. So the Department of Defense and the whole Pentagon, they're very upset about this. What has come out is, this morning they just made an arrest. And so not the whole story is not known, but this is what they know so far. Because yesterday the New York Times had interviewed some young men about this. So the person who leaked it was an airman in the Massachusetts Air National Guard, and he was in the intelligence division. So through his work, he had access to this. Although people are wondering why somebody so low in rank had access to such high information. That's another question. Anyway, it seems like what he did was he was part of another server and group of young men who, how some, especially young men, are just like enraptured with war and guns. And so it was a group of, some of them were early 20s, like this airman, and many of them were teenagers. And so they would play games, war games, and then they would talk about military stuff and make racist remarks. And, this kind of, this is how we have fun online, because they were all shut down during the pandemic. So they became very, very close. So this one airman, who's 21, he felt like, these other young kids, he was the leader of the group, and he felt that all these young people should know what was going on in the world. So he copied some of this intelligence information. Some of it he copied by hand, and later on he began to photograph it and put it on their particular server so only they could access it. And his reason was he felt that they needed to learn about what was happening in the world. And then it seems like just recently, not too long ago, one of the teenagers on that server took some of these intelligence files and put them on another server, or whatever they call it, that was a public one. So that now all these Pentagon national secrets are out in public. Okay, and they found out, the Department of Defense found out about this because the Russians on Telegraph noticed these files, and then the New York Times broke the news, that this was happening. So it's a big thing now. Okay, and this morning they went to, last night the New York Times played some of these interviews with some of these teenagers who just idolized this guy. They thought he was great. Whenever they had problems, he would counsel them. He was like a big brother. He was like a dad. They just revered him over the top. And and they freely gave interviews to the Times about this, but they refused to give his name. Anyway, they found out about, the DOD found out about him because some of the pictures that he took of the classified information was, it looks like he put it on the countertop in his house and took the picture. So part of the picture had the pattern of the countertop in the house. And he had also put other material, personal photos on Instagram or wherever, and they matched the countertop, and that's how they found out that it was him, and the tile on the floor matched. Okay, so they aren't saying that he did it. They're just saying now that he's a person of interest. Okay, but my purpose for telling you all of this is I'm thinking about, he's 21 years old, this guy who did this. And he says his motivation was to get these kids caught up on what was happening in the world. He wasn't a whistleblower. He wasn't, he wasn't an Edward Snowden, put it that way. So, but I thought, wow, look at what attachment to reputation does to your mind. All this group of 20, 30 teenage, young 20s men, or boys, many of them, looked up to him and idolized him. When you're 21 years old and you have a group of people younger than you idolizing you and thinking you're wonderful, you are on the top of the world. Yeah. And it was interesting because even one of the kids who gave the interviews to the Times, I listened to those yesterday, and one of the questions the interviewer asked the teenager is, how did you feel knowing all these secrets about the U.S. government? And he said, I was high in the sky. I felt so wonderful. I knew secrets. I knew all this information that other people didn't know. And so it's this thing of how we think we're special. Because our teacher, gave us this information. We were privileged. Nobody else knows about this except a few people in the Department of Defense and us, Okay, so that teenager felt that way. So the guy who leaked all of this, imagine how he felt. It wasn't just that he had the information, but he had a group of people who idolized him. And so he kept on copying the secret intelligence, top secret stuff, and putting it on their server for them. Okay? So next time you're attached to your reputation and you want people to look up to you and think that you're wonderful, think about the mess that this 21-year-old airman is in right now. Yeah, some guy from the Department of Defense gave an interview. He said this was a deliberate criminal action. He knew it was illegal. I can't mimic an army guy, but you can imagine. Deliberate criminal action. He knew what he was doing. And he did. And he loved these kids. He took care of them, but he loved being a big shot. He loved having a good reputation and having people think he was wonderful. So this, it's a very good example of the fault of attachment to reputation, isn't And if you're a people pleaser and you want people to like you and you dish out what they want so that they'll like you, that's exactly what he did. And his whole life is a mess now. And I mean, I don't want to say ruined, but he could wind up being incarcerated for quite a long time. Yeah?
Not only that, but the impact on the world.
Yes.
This is changing the war, it's changing the impact this is having between countries.
To make sure
just the impact this is having all over the world between countries, whether you're friends or foes, it's a huge impact, and it's actually not going to help the cause of the Ukrainians.
No.
What I understand.
Yeah.
It might hinder their situation.
Yeah, so sometimes we do things not thinking about the consequences and the results. Forget even the karmic consequences. This kid's not thinking about that. But just the real life consequences now for the world. And, just not thinking of the result or the effect of our actions on other people. And so this is a good story for us to remember. Yeah.
And also, too, the four thoughts when you make a decision.
Wait a minute, hold on.
I try to use this as much as I can. When you say, if it's a short-term benefit, long-term benefit, do it. Mm-hmm. If it's a short-term benefit, long-term harm, don't do it. And then you proceed to do the other ones. If it's a struggle in the beginning for the short-term but long-term benefit, do it. And if it's both, forget it. If it's harm, this is a perfect example of short-term praise, long-term help. Yeah, for in a bigger picture.
Yeah. Pass the mic.
Did the teenager who put it on the public server explain why he did that? Because
no, I haven't heard anything about that kid who did that. It was probably because he thought it was cool. Like, wow, I have this secret stuff. It's really cool. I'll put it on a public server. Then I'll also be a big shot. Yeah, I don't know that for sure, but that, yeah. So, when we look all around us in life, we see the long rim and examples of everything the Buddha teaches. If you're ever going, well, how does this teaching apply to me in my life? Just look around and you see examples of it everywhere. And then look at your own behavior and think, when have I acted like that? And similarly, when you see people do really magnanimous, wonderful things for other people, that also is a teaching. The generosity and how people reach out and help each other. Like, in Turkey after the earthquakes, or in different parts of the country after floods, and how people reach out and help each other. And sometimes some of the things I find very moving is when they're rescuing people from water, and sometimes just dogs. They're drowning in the water in a flood, because we've had so much flooding in the States in the past month. And these people will stand out there and rescue a dog in this, the water's going really fast, and they'll throw out ropes. And I saw one where a moose had stepped and broken through the ice and was in this freezing water. It was going to die. And people are out there pulling this moose out, And then similarly, when people are in houses with fires, and you just look around and you see kindness too everywhere. Not just people doing stupid things, but people doing really wise and compassionate things. Yeah. So, Buddha's teaching is just, you look everywhere, it's there.